Did you know that one mistake could cost millions of lives? In this story, the USA decided the fate of the war in just a few days. If you're interested in the truth about World War II, subscribe and hit the like button. There are many shocking facts ahead. March 17, 1943, Rechlin Experimental Airfield, Germany. Imagine for a moment that you're in the cockpit of a machine born of your enemy's genius. The instruments before you hum with unfamiliar life. Your gloved fingers hesitate as you reach for the pen, the tip trembling just slightly. Not from fear, but from the weight of realization. Hans-Werner Lercher, seasoned Luftwaffe test pilot, leans over his logbook and etches a single line mundane on the surface, yet seismic in meaning. On this crisp morning at Rechlin, a new chapter in Germany's understanding of its foe begins. Before him sits the Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress, now in German hands. Coded DL+XC, it stares defiantly back at its captors. A fortress indeed massive, bristling with weaponry, and wholly intact. How could the Americans possibly have built thousands of these? That thought pounds like a drumbeat in Lercher's mind. How could any nation mass-produce such an intricate and deadly machine while also waging war across the globe? Through the armored glass of the cockpit canopy, Lercher's eyes sweep across a console that defies 3 years of Luftwaffe intelligence reports. He sees not just dials and levers, but a blueprint of a revolution in air power. This B-17F, just one version among many, carries 950 caliber machine guns, each spitting 750 rounds per minute. Eventually, he knows, more advanced variants will mount 13 gun positions in all. The overlapping arcs of these weapons form an airborne fortress of lead and steel, capable of defending itself like no other bomber in the skies. This particular aircraft, nicknamed Wolfhound, is the Luftwaffe's first fully operational American heavy bomber. No wreckage, no pieces whole. And that changes everything. Lercher cannot yet know it, but in the coming months, he and his fellow test pilots will uncover truths that no battlefield defeat could rival in psychological impact. Because what they're about to learn isn't just about one aircraft. It's about what happens when you scale that firepower, multiply it by hundreds, flying shoulder to shoulder in disciplined formation. Germany's fighter pilots will face a steel phalanx. And Germany's factories? They cannot dream of keeping up. But how, you might ask, did this flying fortress fall into enemy hands? To answer that, we must turn back the calendar 3 months to a gray December morning. The date, December 12, 1942. Over the foggy skies of occupied France, another pilot wrestled with fate. Lieutenant Paul Flickinger was at the controls of a B-17F, serial number 41245F85, during a bombing raid on the Rouen-Sotteville Railway Yard's vital arteries of German logistics. This bomber bore the name Wolfhound, lovingly painted on the nose by the American ground crew stationed at RAF Molesworth in Huntingdonshire, England. It was part of the 306th 1st Bombardment Squadron, under the 303rd Bombardment Group, nicknamed Hell's Angels. They were still new to war, only a month into their trial by fire, and they had much to learn. That day, the 303rd dispatched 20 flying fortresses to hit Luftwaffe maintenance facilities 60 miles east of Paris. The mission began without incident until the wolves came hunting. German fighters, Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf FW-190s, pounced with vicious precision. Their goal was clear: shatter the American formation, isolate the bombers, and destroy them one by one. Flickinger's Wolfhound soon found itself under relentless assault. Gunfire raked the fuselage. Explosions blossomed along the wings. One engine coughed, sputtered, and went silent, its propeller now a useless pinwheel. Another trailed smoke, wounded and faltering. Now picture yourself in Flickinger's seat. What would you do? Cut off from the others, your plane bleeding altitude and strength. The rest of the formation had no choice but to surge forward, leaving Wolfhound behind. To slow down would invite death for all. Reaching England? Impossible. Not with crippled engines and Luftwaffe fangs on your tail. A desperate dash to neutral Switzerland or Sweden? A suicide flight across hundreds of miles of hostile sky. Only one choice remained, an emergency landing in enemy territory, to surrender the aircraft, and perhaps, unknowingly, alter the course of air warfare. December 12, 1942, near Melun, France. Now imagine you're flying blind, wounded engines groaning as smoke coils past your windows, your bomber limping across the war-torn sky. Below, patchwork fields stretch toward the horizon, blurred by drifting cloud and the stench of burning oil. Lieutenant Paul Flickinger scanned the ground through breaks in the haze. Then there, a clearing, a hayfield near the town of Melun, some 60 miles southeast of Paris. It wasn't a runway, but it was wide, flat, and in that moment, it was hope. Guiding 30 tons of mangled steel, Flickinger executed what seemed impossible, a wheels-up landing in enemy territory. The Wolfhound, battered but defiant, tore a long gash through the soft winter earth, belly sliding across grass and mud. Its ball turret guns pointed uselessly at the ground as the massive aircraft groaned to a halt. One by one, the crew emerged, 10 young Americans stepping out into occupied France, arms raised in surrender. They expected capture, interrogation, POW camps. What they did not expect was this: their aircraft, still mostly intact, was about to become one of the most valuable prizes German intelligence would ever receive. Within hours, a storm of activity descended upon the hayfield. Luftwaffe mechanics, Wehrmacht soldiers, engineers. Cameras clicked furiously as they documented every system, every rivet, every inch of this foreign marvel before curious locals or potential saboteurs could interfere. Wolfhound wasn't just another downed enemy plane. It was an intact treasure trove, a rare glimpse inside the very heart of America's aerial war machine. You see, most Allied bombers the Germans recovered had arrived in pieces, scattered across countryside and forest, twisted and charred, their secrets lost in the wreckage. But this was different. Wolfhound was nearly whole, and that changed everything. To the German recovery teams, this wasn't scrap. It was a golden opportunity. The first flyable B-17 Flying Fortress to fall into German hands, offering direct access to design philosophy, construction techniques, armament layout, and combat capabilities of the United States Army Air Force's primary strategic bomber. The clock started ticking. The decision was made swiftly. Wolfhound must be moved safely to a secure base for further study. The destination, Leeuwarden Airfield in the Netherlands, a major Luftwaffe installation adapted from a former Dutch civil airport. Transporting the damaged bomber would be no small feat, but German crews planned meticulously, determined not to let this once-in-a-war opportunity slip away. December 14th, 1942, just 2 days after the emergency landing. Temporary repairs were completed, fuel tanks brimmed with German aviation gasoline. Technicians painstakingly replaced American insignia with symbols of their own. Black crosses now adorned the wings. A swastika loomed large on the tail, and the grim hues of Nazi Germany black and blood-red broadcast the aircraft's new allegiance. Escorted by 2 Messerschmitt Bf-110 heavy fighters, a specially selected German crew climbed aboard. Their mission? Deliver Wolfhound to its final destination, Rechlin, the Luftwaffe's crown jewel of testing and evaluation, nestled in the forests of Mecklenburg, north of Berlin. The stakes were sky high. To prevent disaster, every flak battery and Luftwaffe airbase along the flight path received strict orders: do not engage this aircraft. And yet, in the fog of war, communication breaks down. Discipline frays. Despite the bold German markings and explicit instructions, several units still opened fire on the wayward bomber. Bullets tore new holes into its fuselage before frantic recognition signals halted the attack. The incident revealed something deeper: a growing fracture within Germany's military machine, disjointed command, strained resources, and a hair-trigger instinct to destroy American bombers at any cost. Eventually, though, Wolfhound touched down at Rechlin. And there, in the cloistered halls and hangars of the Luftwaffe's most secretive airfield, it would begin a second life, not as a weapon of war, but as a vessel of revelation. Rechlin was Germany's answer to Wright Field in the U.S., or Britain's Farnborough, an elite testing ground where captured aircraft were dissected, studied, and flown in the hopes of finding the key to victory. Every component of Wolfhound was now fair game. For the next 3 months, the bomber would not fly. Instead, it would endure a meticulous autopsy by German engineers and scientists. Panels were removed, schematics drawn, measurements taken, and always the same murmur among the technicians: awe. The stressed skin construction, an innovation that gave the B-17 its famed toughness, impressed even the most skeptical German engineers. It was not just a machine, it was a statement of American industrial might, of engineering excellence, of a country capable of sending such behemoths across oceans by the hundreds. But Wolfhound's story wasn't over yet. Winter 1943, Rechlin, Germany. Picture yourself standing in a freezing hangar under the gray sky of Mecklenburg. Before you looms the Wolfhound, wings outstretched, scars of battle still visible, but alive with purpose. Around it, a swarm of engineers bends to its metallic skin with reverence usually reserved for sacred relics. And in many ways, that's exactly what this aircraft had become: a sacred artifact of American industry laid bare on German soil. Clipboards clicked, calipers measured, cameras captured every seam, rivet, and joint. German specialists weren't merely studying a plane, they were peering into the very soul of America's war machine. Every surface was inspected. The aluminum skin, its thickness gauged with micrometers, the metal alloys analyzed for composition, the rivets charted in patterns and tested for tensile strength. Nothing escaped scrutiny. Under every panel lay another puzzle to solve. The electrical system, a nervous system of wires spanning miles, revealed how Americans had mastered complex integration between flight, navigation, and defense controls. The hydraulics? Smooth, sophisticated, showcasing valve designs and pressure regulation that rivaled the best German systems. The oxygen system hinted at intimate knowledge of high-altitude physiology. Even the intercom, clear as crystal through the roar of engines, impressed German technicians. And then there were innovations that simply redefined expectations. The fuel system, with its clever management features, allowed pilots to shift fuel mid-flight to preserve balance and optimize performance. The engine synchronization system, brilliantly automated, reduced pilot workload while squeezing out maximum efficiency from each of the massive Wright Cyclone engines. Every component was documented from every angle, photographed, drawn, measured, and compared to Luftwaffe equivalents. One thing became painfully clear to every German engineer poring over the data. This wasn't just a better bomber. It was a different industrial philosophy, where Germany relied on master craftsmen hand-fitting components with painstaking care. America had embraced modular, interchangeable construction. The B-17's parts, from different factories across different states, fit together as if by magic. But it wasn't magic, it was standardization. It was mass production on a scale Germany could only dream of. What would it mean, the analysts asked, if this one bomber represented a system capable of producing hundreds, no, thousands more like it? When German intelligence did the math, the answer shook even hardened planners. The projected output of the American aircraft industry wasn't just impressive, it was terrifying. And their estimates, grim as they were, would later prove conservative. March 17, 1943, Rechlin Experimental Airfield. And then at last, Wolfhound took to the sky once more. This time, however, it was not an American hand at the controls. Flugzeugführer Böttcher, a Luftwaffe test pilot selected for his skill and composure, eased the throttles forward. The engines roared to life, the landing gear rattled across the Rechlin runway, and with a smooth, commanding lift, the captured bomber climbed into the clouds, an eagle flying with a borrowed flag. From the moment Böttcher touched the controls, it was clear the B-17 was something special. Despite its hulking 30-ton mass when fully loaded, the aircraft responded with an elegance that belied its size. The controls felt balanced, the flight envelope predictable, even graceful. German pilots had long heard stories, filtered through intercepted radio chatter, prisoner debriefings, and captured documents, of the B-17's forgiving nature. But now, they felt it themselves. Even with one or two engines deliberately shut down in flight, the aircraft remained controllable. German bombers couldn't do that. But this explained how so many battered fortresses limped back across the channel, engines shot out, wings torn, but still flying. Spring 1943, the tests begin. Over the weeks that followed, the Wolfhound flew again and again, each sortie designed to peel back another layer of American aeronautical capability. High-altitude trials pushed the aircraft above 25,000 feet, well beyond the optimal range of German flak. Up here, German artillery shells lost velocity. Their flight times lengthened. Their accuracy waned. But the B-17, it thrived. Engine synchronization tests revealed the genius of American constant-speed propeller technology, governed by automated systems that adjusted blade pitch seamlessly, reducing pilot fatigue while optimizing power across altitudes. Formation flying exercises revealed something else. This aircraft was born to fly in groups. Its stability in tight formation allowed dozens, even hundreds, of B-17s to maintain precise geometries in motion, a tactic that turned bomber groups into flying fortresses with interlocking fields of fire. But above all else, it was the defensive armament that riveted German attention. Luftwaffe tactical planners, from group commanders to frontline pilots, urgently needed answers. Where were the blind spots? What angles gave the best chance of attack? At what ranges could German cannons strike without flying into a hurricane of .50 caliber fire? And what they discovered was sobering. The B-17F mounted 9 Browning M2 50 caliber machine guns. Their placement created an almost continuous shield around the aircraft, a deadly latticework of bullets designed to repel any attacker from nearly every angle. Later models, like the soon-to-arrive B-17G, would carry 13. By comparison, German bombers were defenseless glass cannons. The Heinkel He-111, the Luftwaffe's workhorse, had 6 or 7 guns, many of them 7.90 mm rifle caliber, barely effective against attacking fighters. The sleek Junkers Ju-88 had even fewer, sometimes just 4 or 5 scattered and poorly placed. But here was a machine, the Wolfhound, that fired armor-piercing 50 caliber slugs with lethal accuracy out to 600 yards. These rounds could chew through steel, shatter engines, and kill pilots in the blink of an eye. This wasn't just defense, it was deterrence. It was airspace domination through sheer volume of lid. And now the question must be asked, what do you do when your enemy flies fortresses and you fly targets? What happens when brute force is backed by industrial momentum you cannot match? That question, hanging in the air over Rechlin, would haunt Luftwaffe tacticians for the rest of the war. Imagine standing in the shadow of a bomber whose guns could hurl destruction with force unmatched by anything Germany had faced in the skies. Each 50 BMG round fired from the Wolfhound packed 3 times the kinetic energy of the standard German 7.92 mm rifle cartridge. It rivaled the punch of the 13 mm heavy machine guns used by the Luftwaffe. But now there were 9 of them, spewing fire in interlocking arcs. And that wasn't even the final form. Worse was coming. One man would come to know this bomber better than any other German pilot, Hans Werner Lurcher. Through the spring and summer of 1943, he flew Wolfhound more than any other test pilot. After the war, his experiences, once tightly held secrets, were laid bare in his memoir, Luftwaffe Test Pilot, Flying Captured Allied Aircraft of World War II. It was in those pages that the full scope of what he learned in Wolfhound's cockpit came to light. Lurcher didn't approach captured aircraft with hatred. He approached them with curiosity. Scientific, methodical, professional. That mindset made him indispensable. His background in engineering, his years of experience in gliders and powered aircraft, his natural flying instincts, all came together to make him the Luftwaffe's most trusted test pilot for Allied aircraft. Over the course of the war, he flew more than 125 different aircraft types and never once crashed. Not a single major incident. A safety record unmatched, and one earned not by luck, but by discipline and deep understanding. When Lurcher climbed into Wolfhound's cockpit for the first time, he had no manual, no instructor, no checklist, no one to tell him what switch did what. He learned the same way a blind man might learn a new room, through careful touch, intuition, and memory. He studied every dial, guessed at each control's purpose, then took the plane into the sky, where mistakes would not be instantly fatal. And he noticed the differences immediately. The instrument layout diverged sharply from German design. Where the Luftwaffe used varied placements and custom configurations, American designers followed a standardized philosophy. Instruments appeared in familiar patterns across all U.S. aircraft, making it easier for pilots to transition between types. Circuit breakers replaced fuses, allowing quick resets instead of replacement. Pressure gauges read in pounds per square inch, not kilograms per square centimeter. Even the throttle quadrant worked in reverse. Pushing forward increased power, not reduced it. And yet, what impressed Lurcher most wasn't the layout. It was the resilience. The B-17 could absorb punishment that would tear a German bomber apart. The strength came from its construction. Heavy-gauge aluminum alloy frames combined with stressed skin engineering that distributed aerodynamic and combat stress across the entire airframe. It didn't rely on a single backbone. It was a web of strength. More than that, the B-17 was built with redundancy in mind. If one system failed, another took over. Where German bombers had to hope their fuel tanks wouldn't ignite when struck, the B-17 had self-sealing tanks as standard, a technology Germany understood but had never implemented so completely. Armor plating surrounded the crew, particularly around the cockpit, engines, and fuel system. This wasn't just a plane built to fly. It was a plane built to survive. Lurcher and his fellow test pilots at Rechlin didn't stop at studying systems on the ground. They wanted to understand the B-17 from the most important perspective of all, that of the hunter. So they flew live attack drills, launching simulated assaults with Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf FW-190s against Wolfhound in flight. Imagine sitting in the cockpit of a fighter, closing in on a fortress in the sky. You line up your shot, but every angle seems covered. The bomber flies level or it jinks side to side, and still the streams of tracer fire reach for you like claws. These tests were not abstract exercises. They were practical survival tools, a desperate attempt to learn how to approach a fortress and not die. And what they learned was grim. Even the B-17F, the very model they tested, came with 9 Browning M2 50 caliber machine guns. Their fields of fire overlapped across nearly every approach vector. Later versions, especially the B-17G slated to enter service later that year, would increase that number to 13. In contrast, German bombers were flying with what now seemed like museum pieces. The Heinkel Hu-111, mainstay of the Luftwaffe, carried 6 or 7 defensive weapons, many of them 7.92mm rifle caliber guns. The Junkers Ju-88, though fast, had just 4 or 5 gunners scattered through tight spaces with poor fields of fire. These guns were no match for the 50 cal Brownings. Each American round was capable of penetrating armor, destroying engines, shattering canopies, and killing pilots from over 600 yards away. This wasn't just a defensive system. It was a porcupine wrapped in dynamite, daring you to come closer, and it forced the Luftwaffe to rethink everything. Imagine watching from the ground as streaks of fire arc across the sky, the thunder of engines rolling like distant artillery. On airfields and testing grounds across the Reich, Luftwaffe observers, notebooks in hand, traced attack angles and approach paths with cold precision. Every engagement was studied, angles measured, distances recorded, closure rates calculated, exposure times annotated. From above, combat cameramen in chase planes captured every second on film, producing reels that would soon circulate through briefing rooms in Germany and across occupied Europe. But what these films revealed was unsettling. Assumptions that had stood unquestioned since the pre-war era were crumbling under the weight of empirical truth. One tactic, long considered gospel among German fighter pilots, was now being exposed as a death sentence. That tactic? A direct 6 o'clock approach, a rearward attack run, ideal against early war bombers with limited or scattered defensive guns. Against the B-17, it was suicide. The Wolfhound, like all flying fortresses, bristled with overlapping firepower, and none more concentrated than at its tail. The tail gunner, enclosed in a powered Cheyenne turret, operated with an unbroken panoramic view. The clear plexiglass panels offered unmatched visibility, no blind spots above, below, or to either side within 30 degrees of the tail. Every movement in the attacker's path could be tracked in real time, but he wasn't alone. Just above and forward of him, the dorsal turret, a powered Sperry installation mounting twin 50 caliber Brownings, could rotate rearward to augment the tail's defense. Together, they created a double-barreled wall of steel, and still more, the waist gunners, standing at their open windows in the fuselage midsection, were poised to contribute lethal fire to any attacker foolish enough to approach from behind or from slightly below. Now, put yourself in the cockpit of a Messerschmitt Bf-109. You've sighted a lone B-17. You're closing in from astern, and you're accelerating fast. The closure rate? Between 150 to 200 miles per hour. That gives you 3 to 5 seconds, no more, to fire before you must break off or risk colliding with the massive bomber. In that narrow window, you must aim, shoot, and evade. But the Wolfhound is already shooting. 4 heavy machine guns have drawn a bead on you, and with every heartbeat, hundreds of rounds pour into the sky ahead of your nose. You're flying directly into a storm of lead. Luftwaffe combat reports began to reflect this grim new reality. Tail attacks, once dependable, were now statistically deadly. Fighters returned torn, scorched, or didn't return at all. The metaphor used in the debriefings said it all. It was like flying into a storm of tracers. And in the minds of the surviving pilots, that wasn't just a phrase, it was a memory they couldn't shake. And it wasn't just the damage, it was the psychological weight. At typical engagement distances of 400 to 800 yards, American gunners used tracer rounds, bright streaks that made every bullet's path visible. Roughly 1 in every 4 or 5 rounds glowed like a comet. The intent was practical. Give the gunners a visual cue to adjust their aim. But the effect was psychological warfare. German pilots approaching a bomber formation didn't just see one stream of tracers. They saw dozens, hundreds, converging. The sky itself seemed to catch fire. The walls of red and white light looked alive, hungry. Many pilots broke off before reaching firing range. Others flinched at the last second, disturbed not by the bullets themselves, but by the overwhelming perception of invulnerability radiating from the bomber formation. And when attackers tried a different tactic, approaching from below, where they hoped to find a blind spot, they found no comfort there either, because beneath the belly of the beast lurked one of the most extraordinary innovations in aerial defense, the Sperry Ball turret. Imagine crouching in a rotating glass and steel sphere suspended from the belly of a B-17 like a deadly pendant. The gunner climbs in, backwards, feet first, then curls into a position so tight he can't even wear a parachute. His knees are pulled up, shoulders hunched. An oxygen mask presses to his face. Before him, 2 50 caliber Browning machine guns, a computing gun sight, and a 360-degree field of fire. The ball turret provided complete coverage of the lower hemisphere, no blind spots. Its twin guns could rotate in azimuth and elevation, tracking targets from level flight down to nearly vertical. The gunner, eyes glued to the sight, adjusted for speed, deflection, and distance. He had mere seconds to react, but he was watching always coiled like a spring inside a machine that rotated with precision and grace. The physical demands were brutal. Hours inside this fetal position, pressed into cold metal, breathing through rubber, watching death come from below. But the gunner's task was critical. He guarded the underside, the one place many German pilots believed was their safest approach. It wasn't. To survive an attack run on a B-17 was now not just a matter of skill. It was a matter of luck, nerves, and calculated desperation. And even those weren't always enough. Yet no matter how cunning or daring the approach, nothing matched the defensive coverage of the B-17. There was no safe path beneath it. Not a single blind spot escaped the watchful eye of the ball turret. German pilots, bold and experienced as they were, learned through harsh trial and deadly error that diving from below into a B-17 formation was like flying into a meat grinder. Each ball turret rotated with chilling mechanical precision, tracking incoming fighters with uncanny accuracy. From below, dozens of these glass spheres watched the skies like hawks, and when a fighter entered their field, the gunners opened fire as soon as they were in range. Hundreds of tracer rounds stitched the air, fired by gunners curled inside those cramped steel cocoons, barely able to move, yet able to kill with a single burst. Side attacks weren't safer. They meant facing the waist gunners, men stationed at open windows along the bomber's midsection. At 25,000 feet, temperatures dropped below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. The wind howled through the fuselage like a banshee. The roar of engines made speaking nearly impossible, and frostbite nipped at every exposed inch of flesh. Still, the gunners stood their posts, scanning the skies. 50 caliber Brownings ready. The B-17F introduced an innovation that made side defense even more formidable: staggered waist gun positions. No longer would one gunner block another's movement. Now one stood slightly forward on the port side, the other slightly aft on the starboard. From these offset positions, they could cover overlapping fields of fire without getting in each other's way. Each machine gun was mounted on a flexible ring, giving it wide arc control in both azimuth and elevation. Any fighter attempting a beam attack, from left or right, flew directly into crossfire. One waist gunner, the dorsal turret above, and possibly even a second waist gunner tracking from the opposite side. These interlocking zones of fire were not just deterrents, they were traps. A single target could face 3 converging guns, increasing hit probability exponentially. For German fighter pilots, this meant no prolonged engagements. There could be no leisurely approach, no careful aiming. They had to strike fast, then flee. High-speed slashing attacks became the norm. Brief, brutal bursts of gunfire followed by immediate, evasive maneuvers. Anything longer was suicide. So where was the weak point? The answer, revealed through months of testing and bitter combat lessons, lay at the very front. Out of all possible approaches, the one that showed the highest probability of success was a frontal assault, a head-on attack from 12 o'clock high. It was, ironically, the most dangerous-looking path, diving straight into the bomber's nose, but it offered the shortest exposure time, the highest closure speed, and the lowest concentration of defensive fire. In the early B-17 variants, including the F model that Wolfhound represented, the nose was the Achilles heel. Only 2, sometimes 3 flexible machine guns defended the nose, operated by the bombardier and navigator, who were also tasked with primary duties like target acquisition and navigation. These weren't dedicated gunners. They weren't always ready to shoot, and their weapons, mounted in sockets along the plexiglass glazing of the nose, had limited traverse. The guns had to be manually repositioned between mounts, meaning coverage gaps could and did emerge. The nose glass gave the bombardier excellent visibility for using the Norden bomb sight, but this clarity came at a cost. The plexiglass offered little protection. There was no turret, no armor plating, no redirection of fire. If a German fighter could approach from ahead, line up a shot, and fire into the cockpit or forward fuselage, the odds of killing the pilot or destroying vital controls rose dramatically. One man in particular understood this vulnerability long before most: Hauptmann Egon Meyer of Jagdgeschwader II. In late 1942, just before Wolfhound fell into German hands, Meyer pioneered the doctrine of frontal attack. Through tactical experimentation and analysis of wreckage and gunner reports, Meyer realized what many had missed. The B-17's firepower was focused rearward and to the sides. Few guns could effectively track a target approaching from ahead. The nose was fast, exposed, and mostly unprotected. For a skilled pilot, this was the gap in the armor. From 12 o'clock high, with a slight dive angle, a German fighter could aim directly at the cockpit, fire a short, controlled burst, then break low, passing under the bomber before any other gunner could react. And the speeds were staggering. At 350 to 400 miles per hour, the fighter raced headlong into the bomber, flying toward it at a 150 to 100 km/h. The combined closure rate often exceeded 500 mm. At that velocity, the bomber's nose gunners had perhaps 2 seconds, no more, to aim, calculate lead, and fire. 2 seconds, while vibration shook the airframe, freezing winds blurred vision, and a fighter bore down on them with cannons ready. For the German pilot, though, it was different. The B-17 in his sights seemed almost stationary. It grew larger, filled the gun sight, a clear, steady target. A good pilot needed only to hold his nerve, squeeze the trigger, and dive away. And when done correctly, with timing, nerve, and ruthless precision, it worked again and again. But few could master it. Some German pilots mastered the head-on pass, and when they did, the results could be devastating. Reports began to circulate of aces downing multiple B-17s in a single sortie, slicing through formations like blades through cloth. But make no mistake, this tactic demanded steel nerves and almost superhuman discipline. Not every pilot could stomach it. Just picture the scene: bomber and fighter on a collision course, racing toward each other at combined speeds of over 500 miles per hour. That's nearly 750 feet per second. A football field vanishing in the blink of an eye. The fighter pilot had to stare down the monstrous silhouette of a 4-engine fortress as it ballooned in his windscreen, going from a distant dot to a looming wall of aluminum and firepower. The goal? Hold course. Stay steady. Don't fire yet. Wait. Wait until you're within 200 yards or less, point-blank range, and only then unleash your cannons and machine guns. Any hesitation, even a fraction of a second, could doom the attack. An early break, prompted by raw survival instinct, would waste precious ammunition and offer the B-17 a chance to fight back. And German fighters didn't carry much ammo to begin with. Every burst had to count. But here's the catch. Not all pilots could hold their nerve. They would see the glowing tracer lines from the nose guns of the bomber streaking toward them, bullets slicing past the canopy. The fortress itself seemed to swell in size with terrifying speed. For many, it was too much. They peeled away early, breaking the attack, exposing their fighters to deadly retaliation from the top turret as they passed overhead, and missing their only window of opportunity. And even for those who executed the pass perfectly, survival was never guaranteed. The margin for error was razor thin. At such closing speeds, collision was a constant threat. It wasn't rare. Pilots who held on too long, too focused, too aggressive, found themselves with no room to break away. The result was catastrophic. A split-second miscalculation meant their fighter slammed directly into the bomber they just shot down. Crews on both sides died in fireballs that left no trace but smoke and twisted metal. Then came the second surprise. The B-17 didn't always die. Even when riddled with cannon shells, when the nose was shredded, when the cockpit was holed and the windshield gone, the Fortress kept flying. Its reputation for toughness wasn't myth. Unless a cannon burst killed both pilots or knocked out multiple engines at once, many B-17s simply shrugged off damage that would have obliterated a German bomber. This meant that German fighter pilots, even after risking their lives on frontal passes, might still watch their prey limp away, leaking oil, trailing smoke, but still flying west, still fighting back, and still making it home to England. There, American crews would repair the damage, patch the holes, and send the bomber back into the sky. In the brutal math of air combat, a damaged bomber that survived was a failed interception. For the attacking pilot, it meant risk without result. The Luftwaffe needed answers, and so they turned back to Rechlin. In tandem with frontline combat reports pouring in from squadrons across occupied Europe, the test program at Rechlin expanded. Flight data, crew interviews, gun camera footage, it all fed into a growing body of knowledge. That information was disseminated in tactical bulletins, training films, and classified intelligence reports, circulated to fighter groups from the French coast to the Eastern Front. But what did it change? Knowing the strengths of the B-17 didn't make it less deadly. The Americans, after all, didn't stop to rest. They kept building more. Faster than the Luftwaffe could shoot them down, in May and early June of 1943, Wolfhound returned to the test hangars, now under the direction of Department E3, led by engineer Otto Kuno. This round of tests focused on the heart of the beast, engine performance. The objective was clear: measure everything: power output at altitude, supercharger efficiency, fuel consumption curves. No variable was left untouched. The engineers charted how the four Wright Cyclone R-1820 radial engines behaved under combat conditions. Each engine delivered 1,200 horsepower at rated altitude, and together they pushed the 30-ton airframe to speeds approaching 300 miles per hour, with a service ceiling above 35,000 feet. Up there, in the stratosphere, German fighters struggled to breathe. Only the most specialized aircraft, outfitted with pressure suits and advanced oxygen systems, could even reach those altitudes, let alone fight effectively. And then came the most sobering truth of all. German intelligence analysts compared production figures. According to confirmed reports, intercepted communications, captured documents, and factory estimates, Boeing and its subcontractors were churning out B-17s at rates 5 to 10 times greater than the total production of all German heavy bombers combined. The numbers seemed impossible, but the sources were solid, and the implications were devastating. If the United States could build aircraft like the B-17 in such staggering numbers while simultaneously producing fighters, tanks, landing craft, destroyers, and transport planes for every theater of a global war, what chance did Germany have of keeping pace? That question, whispered in staff rooms and scrawled in the margins of Luftwaffe planning documents, haunted German strategists. By 1943, the nature of war had evolved. It was no longer just about tactics and bravery. it had become an industrial struggle, a battle of assembly lines, raw materials, logistics, and machinery. On June 12, 1943, that stark truth came into even sharper focus. At Lutz Airfield, an exhibition was staged for high-ranking Luftwaffe commanders and technical specialists. It was no ordinary display. It was a parade of captured enemy hardware, the likes of which had never been seen together in one place. And at its center, unmistakable even among giants, stood Wolfhound, the captured B-17, polished and lethal in its German markings. But it wasn't alone. There stood a B-24 Liberator, showcasing a different American approach to long-range bombing. Its high aspect ratio wings and slab-sided fuselage reflecting another philosophy of endurance and payload. A P-47 Thunderbolt stood like a brawler, thick and muscular, embodying American fighter doctrine, brute strength, ruggedness, firepower over agility. Nearby, a P-51 Mustang, the aircraft that would soon change the course of the air war, gleamed like a predator. Its long-range fuel capacity and high-altitude performance made it the escort fighter that would accompany bombers deep into Germany and back. A P-38 Lightning, with its twin booms and central nacelle, looked like something from the future. Its unconventional layout, a symbol of American willingness to break design conventions. From the British Isles came no less troubling examples. An Avro Lancaster, proud and imposing, represented the RAF's heavy bomber force, with payload capacity that dwarfed anything in the Luftwaffe inventory. A de Havilland Mosquito, sleek and fast, demonstrated what happened when speed became a substitute for armor. A bomber made of wood, yet too fast to catch. A Hawker Typhoon, bristling with rockets and cannon, showed the British mastery of low-level ground attack. And scattered throughout were variants of the Spitfire, aircraft that traced the evolution of British air power from early war to cutting edge. But this was more than a show and tell. For Luftwaffe personnel, the display had multiple objectives: to familiarize troops with enemy aircraft, their silhouettes, markings, and identifying features, to study and exploit foreign technology, and, perhaps unintentionally, to deliver a sobering reminder of how far the Allies had surged ahead. For many attendees, it was an awakening. One officer would later recall, even to the untrained eye, the difference was obvious. The precision of American assembly, the tight tolerances, the systematic modular construction, all of it pointed to a level of industrial discipline Germany could no longer match. Every rivet seemed to fit perfectly, panels aligned flush without need for rework. The smooth aerodynamic finishes showed not just technical capability, but mass-produced quality at scale. In contrast, German aircraft, increasingly cobbled together in underground facilities by slave labor, under constant air raids that wrecked tooling and scattered production lines, bore the scars of compromise. Misaligned panels, rough welds, hand-fitted parts, and quick battlefield repairs using mismatched materials. These were machines of necessity, not mastery. The implications were unavoidable. Even officers with limited technical knowledge could see it. Germany was struggling to maintain production of aircraft already falling behind, while American factories were rolling out more advanced designs in overwhelming numbers. After its appearance at the Lutz exhibition, Wolfhound returned once again to Rechlin, but this time for something different. It was July 1943, and engineers were preparing the B-17 for a glider towing trial, a test of its suitability for transport and support roles beyond bombing. Germany's DFS-230 combat gliders had proved their worth in daring operations, but they needed powerful tow aircraft. Could the B-17 fill that role? Over several weeks, from June 16th through early August, engineers equipped Wolfhound with towing apparatus and evaluated every aspect of the operation: takeoff procedures, glider release mechanisms, formation handling. The bomber's 4 engines, each producing 200 horsepower, gave it more than enough muscle to tow a fully loaded glider to altitude. From a technical standpoint, the tests were a success. The B-17 proved stable, reliable, and fully capable of supporting glider operations. But the timing was wrong. Germany's airborne forces were in decline. The disaster in Crete still cast a long shadow, where Fallschirmjäger troops suffered 50% casualties, and where the myth of airborne invincibility shattered on the rocks of bitter ground resistance. Other glider operations had proven costly. Fuel was in short supply, and the Luftwaffe simply lacked the aircraft fleet to mount major airborne missions in 1943 and beyond. The glider towing potential of the B-17, impressive as it was, would never be realized. And then in September 1943, Wolfhound was given a new mission. No longer just a test article, no longer a static exhibit. The bomber was transferred from Rechlin to operational service with one of the most shadowy and enigmatic units in the entire German military, Kampfgeschwader 200. Operating out of Rangsdorf Airfield near Berlin, KG 200 wasn't just another bomber group. It was the Luftwaffe's secret weapon, its Black Ops wing. Kampfgeschwader 200 was not like any other unit in the Luftwaffe. It lived in the shadows, moved in secrecy, and carried out missions so unconventional that many within the German High Command barely knew what it did. Its portfolio was vast and dangerous. It ranged from long-range reconnaissance flights deep into enemy skies to infiltration and exfiltration of intelligence agents behind Allied lines. It conducted supply drops to German units trapped in partisan-held territories or surrounded by advancing Allied forces. It tested experimental aircraft and prototype weapons, so sensitive they could not be trusted to standard Luftwaffe evaluation centers. To fulfill these diverse missions, KG-200 operated a mosaic of aircraft unlike anything in conventional service. Logistics didn't dictate their inventory, mission requirements did. Alongside German types like the Junkers Ju 290, the Heinkel He 111, and the massive Arado R-232, the unit flew captured Soviet bombers on the Eastern Front and even American aircraft, B-17s and others, for missions in the West and the Mediterranean. The B-17, with its 2,000-mile range, high operating ceiling above 25,000 feet, and battle-proven ruggedness, was a perfect tool for KG-200's work. It could survive punishment, navigate through harsh weather, and, most critically, masquerade as a returning Allied bomber. This deception was more than theory. In poor visibility or during night missions, Allied radar operators and fighter controllers might see the intruding B-17 and mistake it for one of their own. A fortress returning late from a raid, a straggler limping home, a ghost, perhaps, but a familiar one. And that illusion could buy precious minutes, even hours, before any defense reacted. Enough time to cross the channel, enough time to complete a drop, gather intelligence, disappear. Even in daylight, if flown high and in the right quadrant of the sky, a captured B-17 might slip into American formations, flying briefly alongside them, close enough to photograph tactics, formations, call signs, or radio procedures. At Rangsdorf Airfield, KG-200 gave Wolfhound a new identity for its new role. Gone was the earlier patchwork of experimental paint, the mottled greens and yellow underbellies of test aircraft. In its place, dark camouflage, a cloak of midnight blues and cold grays, designed to fade into the night sky during covert operations over Allied territory. New codes were applied as well. A3+, KG-200's operational side prefix. These markings identified the aircraft to German forces while maintaining a layer of deniability. For Wolfhound, the most commonly cited full code was A3+AE, though some reports suggest this changed depending on the mission. Shifting masks for shifting shadows. But here, the trail grows cold. Precise records of Wolfhound's missions with KG-200 have been lost to history, either destroyed as the Reich collapsed, locked away in classified archives, or never written at all, as was often the case with the most sensitive operations. Testimony from surviving participants remained guarded for decades. Many took their stories to the grave. Still, modern aviation historians have pieced together fragments, enough to sketch the outline, if not the full portrait. At least 4 captured B-17s are known to have been operated by KG-200 between late 1943 and mid-1944. Some sources suggest the number was higher, perhaps as many as 7 or 8 at the peak of operations. These aircraft flew missions across Europe, the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and North Africa, slipping in and out of some of the most volatile theaters of the war. Some of these flights were straightforward transports, moving high-value personnel or critical equipment to German garrisons cut off by enemy advances or isolated in partisan zones. Others were infiltration missions, inserting agents behind enemy lines under cover of darkness, dropping them by parachute, or even conducting high-altitude bailouts, allowing the agent to land miles from the bomber's flight path and avoid suspicion. A few missions were conducted purely for intelligence gathering, photographing ports, airfields, supply depots, any location that hinted at impending operations, invasions, or the buildup of Allied air power. And then there were the truly secret missions, their nature known only to the handful of men involved. No records, no reports, just rumors, fragments, and silence. While Wolfhound operated with KG-200, Hans-Werner Lerche continued flying other captured B-17s returning to Rechlin for testing. One of them was Miss Nonnerly 2, serial number 42-30336, an American B-17F. On October 9, 1943, it made an emergency landing in a field on the Norholm estate near Varde, Denmark, after suffering engine trouble during a raid over Germany. Another fortress, another opportunity. And so the strange journey of American bombers in German hands continued. Tools of war repurposed, repainted, and reprogrammed in the great theater of deception. The American crew had bailed out over Denmark, drifting down through cloud and cold air, trusting parachutes to deliver them safely to Earth. But their pilot stayed with the aircraft, fighting to keep it aloft, coaxing it through engine trouble and failing systems. He brought the B-17 down in a controlled crash landing on open farmland, a testament not just to skill, but to the aircraft itself. Even damaged, it remained tame and responsive, docile in crisis. German recovery teams were on the scene quickly. They knew what this was, another fortress, mostly intact, another chance to unlock Allied secrets. And once again, Hans-Werner Lerche answered the call. With no instruction manual, no pre-flight orientation, and no ground school training, Lerche climbed into the unfamiliar cockpit of an American bomber, adjusted his headset, ran his eyes over the alien gauges and flew the aircraft out of the field. He brought it to Esbjerg Airfield and from there to Rechlin, where the B-17 would begin its second life under German evaluation. This ability to take an unfamiliar machine into the sky with no preparation was nothing short of astonishing. It spoke volumes about Lurch's extraordinary instincts, his deep aeronautical intuition, and perhaps most of all, about the B-17 itself. Stable, predictable, forgiving. The aircraft, once known as Miss Nonnerly II, received the German code 7+8 and entered service as a test bed. Records show it was still flying test missions in December 1944. More than a year after its capture, each newly acquired fortress represented a fresh opportunity. Engineers at Rechlin dove in, comparing production blocks, examining structural differences between serial batches, searching for signs of improvement or potential weakness. Could changes in armor layout indicate a new vulnerability? Could revised fuel systems offer a new point of attack? They went further, conducting live fire trials, testing German ammunition types against B-17 airframes. How did 20mm cannon shells fare against self-sealing fuel tanks? What effect did 30mm rounds have on armor plating and load-bearing structure? The results were sobering. The 20mm, once the mainstay of Luftwaffe fighters, was revealed to be only marginally effective. Hits had to be precise and repeated to cripple a fortress. But the 30mm cannon? Devastating. When it struck, it often tore through multiple systems, snapping spars, detonating fuel, killing crew with a single blast. From these tests emerged a grim and complete picture. The B-17, especially the new G variant, represented the zenith of American bomber design in 1943. It was not just an aircraft. It was a flying fortress in every sense, built to endure, to fight, and to protect itself in the deadliest skies on Earth. The German test pilots at Rechlin began running the numbers. What they found was staggering. The B-17G, final and most heavily armed of the series, carried 1350 caliber Browning M2 machine guns. Each gun fired between 750 and 800 rounds per minute. Spread across the aircraft's defensive positions, this gave the bomber the ability to unleash a blizzard of fire, sustained, heavy, and lethal. The typical ammunition load, about 7,500 rounds, distributed with meticulous planning across all gun stations. It was a balancing act, enough firepower to survive a 5-hour mission over Europe, but not so much that the weight crippled range or altitude performance. The tail turret alone carried 1,000 rounds, 500 per gun, enough to keep enemy fighters at bay during the long, vulnerable return to England. The top turret had a comparable reserve. Even the ball turret, cramped and confined, packed 250 to 500 rounds per gun, depending on mission requirements. The waist gunners each had between 600 and 800 rounds, while the chin and cheek guns, those defending the nose, were similarly stocked to ensure continuous fire. And then the German engineers asked the most important question of all. What happened when a B-17 fired everything at once? The answer: pure firestorm. 13 guns, each spitting out 750 rounds per minute, produced nearly 10,000 rounds per minute of combined fire. Translated to real-world terms, 160 rounds per second, that meant a bomber could saturate its approach vector with a curtain of steel that no fighter could ignore. And yet, the B-17 was never designed to fight alone. From the start, American air doctrine, refined through experience and blood in 1942 and 1943, emphasized mass formation flying. The combat box became the cornerstone of strategic bombing, each aircraft protecting its neighbor with overlapping fields of fire. Colonel Curtis LeMay, architect of this deadly ballet, refined the concept into a three-dimensional shield. 3 bombers flew in tight formation, an element. 3 elements formed a squadron box of 9. Stack 3 boxes vertically, and you had a group box of 27 aircraft. Sometimes 4 squadrons flew together, up to 36 bombers in one group. Each bomber, even if only carrying 9 guns, as many still did, added to the whole. A 27 aircraft group brought 243 heavy machine guns to bear. A full wing with 3 group boxes could field between 500 and 750 caliber guns, all with interlocking fire. This was no longer a formation. It was a flying fortress city, built of aluminum, manned by thousands of men, and surrounded by a dome of fire. German fighters didn't just face one bomber, they faced dozens, each with its own kill zone. Entering that space meant crossing through overlapping cones of bullets, where every approach angle had been anticipated and every second counted. And yet, the Americans kept coming. For German fighter pilots, attacking an American bomber formation wasn't just a tactical challenge. It was a psychological gauntlet. Again and again, they described the same image: a wall of tracers. That was how it looked, a curtain of glowing red and white streaks burning across the sky like a net of fire. At combat ranges of 400 to 800 yards, every B-17 gunner who saw a fighter moving into his field of fire opened up immediately. The result? A visual display that was, by all accounts, both beautiful and horrifying. A deadly ballet of light and steel that pulsed through the thin air at 25,000 feet. A single attacking fighter making a head-on pass might suddenly find 50 or more heavy machine guns zeroing in at once. Each bomber's gunners tracked the target independently, pulling triggers, adjusting aim, loosing streams of 50 caliber rounds at maximum rate of fire, 750 to 800 rounds per minute per gun. And yet, it wasn't always the bullets that stopped the attack. Often, it was the mind of the pilot. Despite the relatively low hit probability, due to range estimation difficulties, high closure speeds, and the immense challenge of deflection shooting, the psychological impact of that massed fire could be crushing. Luftwaffe after-action reports told a story of pilots who simply couldn't make themselves continue. Many broke off too early, unwilling to plunge deeper into the storm of tracers to reach effective range. But those who held formation discipline, those who pressed the attack home, faced a different problem: math, cold, brutal, and merciless. German studies based on real combat data painted a grim picture. To destroy a B-17 from behind using 20mm cannon fire, a fighter needed to score about 20 hits, and those hits had to be distributed across vulnerable areas like engines, fuel tanks, or crew compartments. But the B-17 wasn't built like a standard aircraft. Its redundant systems, stressed skin structure, and self-sealing tanks made it incredibly hard to kill. One engine could be gone, or 2, and still the fortress would fly. The average pilot hit rate? About 2% at these ranges. That figure came from exhaustive analysis of gun camera footage and ammunition expenditure logs. Put simply, to score those 20 hits, a fighter pilot had to fire about 1,000 rounds of 20mm ammunition. And here came the problem. Early model FW-190s, Germany's most capable fighters, carried only 500 rounds total for their twin 20mm cannons. That's 250 rounds per gun, stored in drum magazines. Enough, perhaps, for one attack run. No more. Later variants upgraded to 4 cannons. with belt-fed systems replacing drums. But even then, total ammunition increased to only 500 to 600 rounds across all 4 guns, still barely enough for 2 full passes. That was the equation: 1 pass, maybe 2, and then Winchester, out of ammo, returned to base. Meanwhile, the bombers? They never stopped firing. As long as a fighter was in range, the B-17s kept up their defensive barrage. Their vast ammunition loads, 7,500 rounds per aircraft, ensured that gunners could fire continuously throughout the mission. Even with hit rates as low as 1 to 2%, the sheer volume of fire meant hits became statistically inevitable. 1 missed pass, 1 slow turn, and a fighter could be shredded by dozens of converging gun positions. Through 1943, the pattern was clear. Luftwaffe losses rose steadily and relentlessly. American bomber formations were growing, more frequent, more massive, and increasingly well defended. And German fighter units, already struggling to replace combat losses, were being further decimated by training accidents, fuel shortages, and the simple grind of attrition. Frontal attacks offered better kill ratios and were favored by skilled pilots, but they required a level of nerve, timing, and precision that few could consistently summon. At those closure speeds, often exceeding 500 miles per hour, everything happened in seconds. The bomber rushed toward the fighter, or the fighter toward the bomber, both moving at full speed. The target picture changed constantly, growing larger in the gun sight, shifting laterally, requiring moment-to-moment correction. Range estimation became the tightrope between success and death. Fire too early, and the round scattered harmlessly in the air. Wait too long, and you slammed into your target. The optimal firing window, just 2 seconds, between 400 and 100 yards. In those 2 seconds, the attacking pilot had to do it all: aim, compensate for his own motion, time the shot perfectly, and break away before it was too late. 1 moment of hesitation, 1 miscalculation, and both aircraft vanished in fire. This was the unforgiving truth of air combat over Europe in 1943. It wasn't enough to fly fast. It wasn't even enough to be brave. To survive a frontal pass against a B-17 formation, a German fighter pilot had to do everything perfectly in under 2 seconds. Compensate for the bomber's evasive maneuvers, subtle altitude changes, slight turns, fire multiple bursts, adjusting between volleys as the target shifted and tracers danced through the sky. And just before the point of no return, just before the bomber filled the canopy, the pilot had to break away cleanly, peeling off in a precise split-second maneuver to avoid deadly collision. All of this demanded not just nerves of steel, but constant training and razor-sharp reflexes, qualities that only seasoned veterans possessed in abundance. That was the gift of the captured B-17 at Rechlin. Unlike anything the Luftwaffe had encountered before, it offered fighter pilots a chance to know their enemy not from a distance, not through tracers and smoke, but up close. They walked around it, studying its design like archaeologists uncovering an ancient weapon. They examined every gun mount, noted every angle, measured fields of fire. They climbed inside through the waste windows, crawling down the narrow catwalk, squeezing through hatches and feeling for themselves the cramped, freezing, deafening world that American gunners inhabited. They sat at every station, in the tail, the dorsal turret, the cheek mounts, even the suffocating ball turret. They tested the limits, how far a gun could traverse, what angles left blind spots, where a fighter might slip in undetected, and then they flew formation exercises with the B-17 performing evasive maneuvers as German fighters practiced attack vectors, approach speeds, and escape routes. These drills, based on intimate mechanical knowledge, gave experienced Luftwaffe pilots a temporary edge. They learned how to exploit weaknesses, when to strike, and when to disengage. But time was against them. By late 1943, the Luftwaffe was hemorrhaging talent. Veteran pilots, the men who had flown hundreds of hours, who had survived the cauldron of combat and mastered its cruel rhythm, were being lost faster than training schools could replace them. Their replacements, young, eager, but inexperienced. They had the theory, not the feel. These new pilots lacked the hours, the instincts, the subtle awareness that kept veterans alive. They broke off too early, wasting ammunition, or they pressed too far, colliding with the very bombers they sought to destroy. Their losses mounted, their confidence waned, and all the while, the Americans were learning, adapting, evolving. In the late summer and fall of 1943, a new shadow began appearing in the sky, the B-17G. It brought with it a crucial change, one that shattered the Luftwaffe's most successful tactic. Beneath the bomber's iconic nose now sat a chin turret, sleek, deadly, and remote-controlled. Operated by the bombardier using a computing gun sight, this turret housed two 50-caliber Browning machine guns and could engage attackers head-on with surgical precision. Suddenly, the head-on attack, once the preferred tactic of German aces, became a high-stakes gamble. The chin turret's field of fire overlapped with the cheek guns, manned by the navigator and bombardier, and the dorsal turret, which could swivel forward to contribute its twin barrels. That meant a frontal attacker now faced 6 to 8 heavy machine guns, all focused along the same intercept path, all spitting fire with deadly accuracy. The once viable attack corridor had become a cone of death. The Luftwaffe had to adapt. Again. Some pilots began approaching from high oblique angles, diving sharply from above and ahead, angles where the gun turret's elevation limits left small gaps in coverage. Others crept in from below the nose, attempting to stay beneath the chin turret's depression arc while avoiding the deadly ball turret suspended beneath the fuselage. Still others abandoned gun passes altogether. Instead, they turned to standoff weapons. Long-range rockets fired from beyond the effective range of the B-17's guns, hoping for lucky hits or damaging near misses. The most widely adopted of these was the Werfer Granite 21, a 20-ton guided rocket launched from tubular pods mounted under the wings of FW-190s and BF-109s. It wasn't accurate. It didn't have to be. A single rocket, exploding amid a tightly packed formation, could shatter a bomber, rip a wing from a neighbor, or trigger a mid-air collision that spread chaos across the sky. This wasn't precision warfare. It was area denial, a desperate effort to break up the bomber stream before it reached its target. And yet, the fortresses kept coming. These unguided rockets, blunt and brutal, weren't designed to strike a single target with surgical accuracy. They carried massive, high-explosive warheads intended not to hit, but to disrupt. Their goal was simple: break up the formation. One explosion in the middle of a tightly packed combat box could shred metal with blast and fragmentation, knock bombers into each other, or provoke violent evasive maneuvers that tore apart the cohesion of the group. But standoff attacks brought their own set of problems that quickly revealed their limits. Accuracy degraded badly beyond 800 yards. The rockets were aerodynamically crude, dropping fast and drifting off course. Worse, they were heavy, creating enormous drag and crippling the fighter's performance. pilots flying with rocket tubes under their wings became lumbering targets, easy prey for the very aircraft they sought to avoid. By 1944, that threat had arrived in force. American escort fighters, once absent deep inside German airspace, now flew all the way to Berlin and back. The P-51 Mustang, sleek and long-legged, and the P-47 Thunderbolt, thunderous and tough, had both received long-range upgrades, and with them came a new reality. The Luftwaffe no longer had sanctuary. The air war had become a technological arms race, and it raged through 1943 and 1944. The Luftwaffe fielded heavier cannons like the 30mm, capable of blasting a B-17 out of the sky with just a few hits. They tested larger rockets, tried guided weapons, and even resorted to radical tactics, like dropping bombs from fighters above bomber formations, hoping a lucky hit would break the enemy apart. But the Americans adapted just as quickly. With the arrival of the B-17G, the fortress's defensive armament reached its peak. New turrets, refined firing arcs, and more ammunition gave gunners better chances of survival. Formation tactics, once theoretical, were now battle-hardened, improved through bitter experience and written in blood. And the escort fighters, now always present, turned the tide. Yet amid all these tactical innovations, one truth loomed above all others, a truth no cannon, no rocket, no maneuver could overcome. American industry could replace losses faster than Germany could inflict them. Every B-17 shot down over Europe felt like a tactical victory to the Luftwaffe pilot who scored the kill. But was it strategic victory? Only if that bomber's loss stopped the next raid or the one after that. It never did. Within days, sometimes within hours, a replacement bomber, fresh off the lines at Bowen in Seattle, Douglas in Long Beach, or Vega in Burbank, arrived in England. A new crew, a new fortress. The mission would go on. The production numbers told the story, and it was staggering. Between 1935 and 1945, 12,731 B-17s were built, nearly all of them between 1943 and 1945, during the war's most intense years. At its peak, in 1944, Boeing's Seattle plant alone was turning out 362 B-17s per month, more than 12 bombers a day, from one factory. To the Germans, it seemed like fantasy, but the data didn't lie. Boeing built 6,281 B-17s across all variants. Douglas contributed 3,000 from Long Beach. Vega, a Lockheed subsidiary, built 2,650 from Burbank. The Luftwaffe's only four-engine heavy bomber, the Heinkel 177, never even entered the same league. It had taken years of development, plagued by a flawed engine configuration that frequently caught fire. Even when operational, it was unreliable. Between 1942 and 1944, Germany managed to build barely 100 of them, a fraction of American output, and many squadrons refused to accept them, preferring twin-engine medium bombers with inferior range and payload simply because they worked. In the end, Germany's inability to match either the quantity or quality of American bomber production wasn't just a tactical failure. It was a strategic collapse rooted in flawed planning, fragmented industrial coordination, and crippling resource shortages. When Luftwaffe pilots were briefed on these production statistics, meant to prepare them for the growing scale of American air power, the effect was often the opposite. Morale sank. For thoughtful pilots, the question became inescapable. Why risk my life to shoot down one fortress when 10 more will take its place next week? This wasn't cynicism, it was mathematical certainty. And it haunted squadrons across Germany as 1944 ground on, and the war turned decisively against the Reich. Back at Rechlin, the captured B-17 provided answers. Answers that explained how this miracle of production was even possible. Engineers disassembled and studied every inch of the aircraft. They were no longer just looking for vulnerabilities. They were trying to understand how the Americans had built such a complex machine so quickly, in such massive numbers. What they found amazed them. The bomber's modular construction meant that sub-assemblies built at dozens of factories across the U.S. could be brought together and snapped into place with minimal hand-fitting. Its components were standardized, built by hundreds of subcontractors, all working in coordination. Even more shocking was who built them. American factories, filled with semi-skilled workers, many of them women new to industrial labor, were producing bombers faster than experienced German craftsmen, using traditional, labor-intensive methods, and it worked. German reports on these studies, now declassified, expressed grudging admiration for the American system and quiet despair, because they understood what it meant. The B-17 was more than a bomber. It was a symbol of industrial warfare, a product not just of clever engineering, but of an entire economy geared for war. The B-17 didn't just represent an aircraft. It embodied an entire manufacturing philosophy, one rooted not in artisanry but in efficiency, scalability, and strategic intent. Every rivet, every joint, every bracket spoke of an industrial doctrine that prized volume over perfection, interchangeability over handcrafted fit, adequate reliability over flawless refinement. Every design decision served that singular goal, to build thousands of bombers, fast. The aircraft's standardized fasteners reduced inventory burdens and simplified supply chains. Straight panel construction with minimal compound curves made shaping aluminum faster, with fewer errors and less waste. And perhaps most revolutionary of all, its modular architecture with sub-assemblies for wings, fuselage, and empennage produced in parallel, then mated seamlessly in final assembly, slashed build times to unprecedented levels. At its peak, Boeing's Seattle plant was rolling a completed B-17 off the line every hour. To German observers at Rechlin, still building aircraft in weeks, this was beyond comprehension. Their factories still relied on master craftsmen, hand-riveting frames, and painstakingly aligning components with chalk, clamps, and muscle memory. It was a world of artisanal excellence and strategic obsolescence. The Luftwaffe's technical personnel saw the implications immediately. Even if Germany achieved a favorable kill ratio, 2 or 3 bombers down per fighter lost, it didn't matter. America could absorb that loss. Germany could not. By mid-1944, this truth was undeniable, even to the most optimistic commanders. The question was no longer, can we win the air war? It had shifted to something more painful. How much longer can we endure it? At Rechlin, Wolfhound and her sister ships had taught the Luftwaffe everything there was to learn about the flying fortress. They understood the strengths, the rugged airframe, the heavy defensive armament, the altitude performance, the formation tactics that multiplied its power. They knew the vulnerabilities, the earlier models' exposed nose, the blind spots in the tail cone, the reliance on tight formation integrity. They had measured the range, altitude, and payload capabilities. They had flown formation intercepts and simulated attack angles. They had documented every strength and every flaw. They had even developed effective tactics, head-on attacks, high obliques, standoff rockets that could bring fortresses down when executed by experienced, courageous pilots. But none of that changed the reality, because for every Luftwaffe pilot trained at Rechlin or blooded in combat, 10 new American bomber crews were being trained and shipped to England. For every B-17 that plummeted into a smoking crater, 5 more took flight from Seattle, Long Beach, or Burbank. For every successful German interception, a dozen raids followed with even larger formations, even heavier escorts, even greater momentum. The B-17 was never just a bomber. It was a strategic instrument designed for deep penetration, massed firepower, and relentless pressure. Its stats told part of the story. Range: over 2,000 miles altitude, above 25,000 feet. Payload: 4,000 oz to 8,000 pounds. Defensive guns: up to 1350 caliber machine guns. But it was the system, not just the machine, that changed everything. Hundreds of these aircraft, flying in tight, mutually supporting formations, projected American military will deep into the heart of Europe, not as scattered strikes, but as sustained, industrialized aerial warfare. Luftwaffe, General Adolf Galland, the renowned ace with 104 confirmed kills and eventual commander of all German fighter forces, would later write extensively about this challenge. In his post-war reflections, Galland admitted that German pilots, particularly those flying the advanced FW-190D9 and Bf-109K4, enjoyed superior training and often better aircraft performance. Faster, more agile, and armed with cannons that hit harder than anything mounted on a B-17. But none of that had been enough. The American daylight bombing offensive had burned Germany's industrial capacity to the ground. In interview after interview, Galland named the same culprit: American industry. They had simply built more of everything faster than Germany could destroy it: bombers, fighters, tanks, ships, men. The captured fortresses at Rechlin had confirmed this bitter truth. German engineers, methodical and exacting, dismantled every system, studied every component, tested every material. What they found left no room for false comfort. The B-17 was not just rugged, it was mature engineering, executed with manufacturing brilliance, combining the best technologies in one coherent weapon. It didn't need to be perfect, it needed to be good, and built by the thousand, no matter how skilled the pilot, no matter how daring the tactic. In a war of attrition, industrial superiority would always win, and through it all, Hans Werner Lercher remained the calm eye in the storm. He flew over 125 different aircraft types, many of them captured Allied designs. He mastered them all, without once damaging an aircraft, without a single serious accident. In a world built on risk, fire, and metal fatigue, that was nothing short of extraordinary. His story, and the story of Wolfhound, offer more than technical insight. They remind us that wars are not won only in dogfights or bombing runs, but in factories, supply chains, and the ability to build faster than your enemy can destroy. In his post-war writings, Hans Werner Lercher spoke with a tone of quiet admiration and frustration. He held a professional respect for Allied aviation technology, particularly the American mastery of mass production and systematic design. But that respect was always tempered by a gnawing recognition. Germany could not match it, not in production rates, not in organizational efficiency, not in the scale of effort that turned blueprints into thousands of flying machines. Lercher had flown them all: B-17s, B-24 Liberators, Lancasters, Soviet P-2s, and a multitude of fighter types from nearly every nation involved in the war. Each aircraft told a story of national priorities, engineering philosophies, and strategic intent. But among them all, the B-17 Flying Fortress remained, in his words, the most strategically significant aircraft I ever flew. It wasn't just the machine, it was what it represented. American strategic bombing doctrine made manifest in aluminum, rivets, and roaring engines. Every inch of its design served a single mission: to fly deep into enemy territory, to deliver a lethal payload with precision, and to survive the return journey despite the full weight of Axis opposition. The defensive armament, so admired and feared by German test pilots, was not an afterthought. It was the enabler. Without those .50 caliber machine guns, without the interlocking defensive formations, daylight bombing would have been suicide. American bombers would have suffered losses so severe that even the prodigious U.S. industry couldn't have kept pace. The air war would have shifted to the night, like the British, sacrificing accuracy and tempo. The B-17's guns didn't make it invulnerable. Far from it. Thousands of fortresses were blown from the sky, torn apart by cannon fire, shredded by flak, or sent down in spirals of smoke. But enough made it through, enough survived, enough returned to hit their next target. Enough crews survived their 25-mission tour, later raised to 35, to pass on hard-won experience to the next wave. Enough bombs found their mark to cripple German industry, sever transportation arteries, and choke off the lifeblood of the Reich's war machine. By the time Wolfhound met its end, burned and broken during an American bombing raid on Oranienburg airfield on April 10th, 1945, the strategic campaign it had once served to defend against had already achieved its goals. The Ruhr Valley, the heart of German industry, lay in smoking ruins. Oil refineries, transportation hubs, munitions factories, all reduced to rubble or rendered inoperable. Fuel shortages grounded the Luftwaffe even when aircraft were available. Trains no longer reached the front. Armies waited for supplies that would never come. The fortresses had done their work. Wolfhound, once a proud American bomber, then a German test aircraft, then a tool of special operations, had become something else entirely. A symbol of the futility of resisting overwhelming industrial power. Luftwaffe fighter pilots, trained on its systems, fluent in its weaknesses, found themselves outnumbered, outgunned, and increasingly irrelevant. For every skillfully executed attack, hundreds of new fortresses followed, escorted now by equal numbers of long-range fighters. No pilot, no tactic, no clever ploy could stand against such numerical supremacy. The story of the captured B-17s, those strange, remarked ghosts flying in German skies, remains a curious footnote in the larger story of strategic bombing. But it is a revealing one. These were machines built by American workers, flown into combat, shot down, then rebuilt by their enemies, and flown again. This time to serve German purposes. They trained pilots. They informed tactics. They supported covert missions. And they contributed in their own paradoxical way to Germany's war effort. But in doing so, they also exposed the very weakness that would doom that effort. Every hour a German mechanic spent repairing a B-17 was an hour not spent on a Focke-Wulf or a Messerschmitt. Every drop of fuel fed into a captured bomber was fuel denied to the front lines. Every round fired during evaluation was ammunition. Germany could not afford to waste, and across the Atlantic, the conveyor belts never stopped. Boeing alone built 6,881 B-17s across all variants, from the early Y-1 B-17 to the final B-17G in its Seattle facility. Each one assembled with industrial discipline that stunned German analysts. Each one delivered with the confidence that another would follow. The Germans had no answer. Their own four-engine bomber program, the Heinkel-He 107, yielded barely 100 aircraft in total. Many sat grounded with mechanical faults. Others burst into flames mid-air. Few made a strategic impact. And so, when Hans Werner Lurcher, the man who had flown over 125 types of aircraft without a single serious accident, looked back at the war in his later writings, his reflections were both clinical and elegiac. He praised the rugged design, the modular efficiency, the tactical doctrine behind the Flying Fortress. But he also saw what it truly represented, not just American ingenuity, but American inevitability. From 1942 to 1945, Douglas Aircraft rolled out 3,000 B-17s from its sprawling facilities in Long Beach, California. Vega, the Lockheed subsidiary in Burbank, added 2,750 more. By the time the final Flying Fortress was delivered in May 1945, total production had exceeded 12,731 aircraft, a figure that defied belief even among those who studied it in real time. Each B-17 was a masterclass in mass production, a flying assembly of roughly 40,000 individual parts manufactured by hundreds of subcontractors across the United States. It carried 4 Wright Cyclone R-1820 radial engines, each producing 1,100 horsepower, miles of electrical cabling, and thousands of pounds of aluminum skin and structure. Add to that its hallmark, up to 13 .50 caliber Browning machine guns fed by thousands of rounds of ammunition strategically positioned for all-around defensive fire. Germany, by contrast, never built a 4-engine bomber in similar numbers. Despite possessing, in the 1930s, one of the world's most advanced aviation industries and having pioneered many of the strategic bombing concepts that others later perfected, Germany never fielded even 2,000 4-engine bombers in total during the entire war. The reasons for this stark disparity went far beyond square footage on factory floors. At the heart of it lay a fundamental divergence in military philosophy. The United States committed early to strategic bombing, to building deep penetration aircraft capable of carrying heavy bomb loads across vast distances. Germany, however, prioritized medium bombers and dive bombers, optimized for tactical support of ground forces. The Luftwaffe was built to blitz, not to endure. American geography allowed the U.S. to build in peace, unreachable by enemy bombers, protected by 2 oceans. While American plants expanded and streamlined, German factories burned. Allied air raids smashed tools, leveled buildings, and killed trained workers faster than they could be replaced. America's engineering schools graduated tens of thousands of designers, project managers, and factory supervisors every year, feeding an ever-growing wartime industrial machine. Germany, bleeding manpower on the Eastern Front and across occupied Europe, struggled to keep its own industries staffed and supplied, and perhaps most decisive of all, the American political and economic system adapted to total war, while Nazi Germany strangled itself in a web of competing power centers, ideological infighting, and rigid inefficiency. All of these threads wove together to create the industrial juggernaut that shaped the war's outcome. The B-17 Flying Fortress was only one weapon among thousands in the American arsenal, but it symbolized the entire system. When Luftwaffe officers stood before Wolfhound at Rechlin, inspecting its rivets, crawling through its belly, testing its systems, they weren't just evaluating a bomber, they were studying American industrial civilization. And if they had looked honestly, the conclusion should have been obvious from the first moment. You cannot defeat an enemy who can build bombers faster than you can shoot them down. You cannot outlast an adversary who trains more crews than you can kill, who delivers more explosives than your entire wartime economy can produce, who solves strategic problems not with improvisation, but with entire factories. The 13 guns on the B-17G weren't the real threat. They were just the visible edge of a much deeper blade, the razor of American economic organization, of resource control, of logistical supremacy. That was the real weapon, a system that, during the war, built over 12,000 B-17s, more than 300,000 aircraft of all types, 88,000 tanks, 41 billion rounds of ammunition, and everything else needed to fight and win a global war across 2 oceans and multiple continents. There was no tactic, no ace, no innovation that could offset that scale. Little wonder, then, that Hans Werner Lercher, after flying dozens of captured Allied aircraft, after testing and evaluating the enemy's best, came to a single conclusion, one he recorded soberly, without dramatics. Germany lost the war by 1943, not in the skies over Berlin, not at Kursk, not on the beaches of Normandy, but in the factories, in the mathematics. The numbers told the truth, and the arithmetic of material production was absolute. By 1943, the only questions left were when the war would end and how much destruction it would leave behind. Wolfhound and the other captured B-17s answered many tactical questions. They revealed blind spots, weak systems, vulnerable angles of attack. They trained German pilots in recognition, interception, and coordinated engagement. But they could not answer the strategic question that truly mattered. How do you stop 10,000 bombers when you can barely build 1,000 fighters? How do you hold your cities together when they burn night after night under tonnage your enemy replaces daily? How do you win a war that has become a test of industrial gravity when all the weight is against you? Within the framework of Nazi Germany's war strategy, there was no answer. The system could not adapt. It had not been designed for a long war, and the moment it became one, Germany's defeat was sealed, not in fire, but in forging presses and shipping yards. The B-17 Flying Fortress, with its high-altitude range, its rugged durability, its brutal defensive fields of fire, and its sheer reproducibility, became more than a symbol of air power. It was a verdict. The bombers came every day, in greater numbers, flying higher, farther, and deadlier than ever before. Their escorts, Mustangs, and Thunderbolts grew in strength and reach, swarming through the skies, clearing the path for the fortresses to strike, and the targets burned one by one with systematic precision. Rail yards, oil refineries, ball-bearing factories, aircraft assembly plants. The beating heart of Germany's war machine was slowly, methodically torn out from above, and despite the heroism of its pilots, despite the ingenuity of its engineers, the Luftwaffe could do nothing to stop it. At Rechlin, Luftwaffe test pilots had flown the captured B-17s extensively. They had pulled apart every panel, traced every cable, tested every turret. And when they spoke of the fortress, they did so with grudging respect. They respected its ruggedness, the way it absorbed punishment and still brought its crew home. They admired its thoughtful layout, how it gave gunners wide fields of fire and prioritized crew survival with armor, redundant systems, and damage control measures. And they never underestimated its defensive firepower. The 13 Browning machine guns that turned the sky into a minefield of lead. But respect did not equate to victory. Understanding the enemy's capabilities could only take you so far. It didn't build more fighters. It didn't train more crews. It didn't manufacture more fuel or deliver more ammunition. And by late 1944, Germany simply didn't have enough of anything left. Most of the captured B-17s had by then been destroyed, grounded, or rendered useless. Some were obliterated in the very bombing raids they once helped Germany understand. Others broke down, starved for spare parts, left to rot on forgotten airfields as supply lines collapsed. A few remained, ghost ships flying clandestine missions for KG-200, even into the last weeks of the war, but their value had long since faded. The Luftwaffe knew all there was to know about the fortress. They knew the blind spots, the arcs the guns couldn't reach. They understood the structural weaknesses, the soft targets, hydraulic systems, oxygen lines. They had developed tactics to exploit them, head-on passes, rocket salvos, steep, oblique dives. But none of it mattered, because by 1945, the skies over Europe were filled not with formations of a few dozen aircraft, but with waves, hundreds upon hundreds of B-17s escorted by hundreds more fighters. The math had simply tilted too far. German pilots still scored victories. Some aces carved out extraordinary kill counts, shooting down dozens of bombers, many using attack techniques honed at Rechlin, tested on Wolfhound or its sister ships. But these triumphs, however valiant, were fleeting sparks in a sky going dark, because for every ace who survived long enough to become an expert, 10 novice pilots died within their first few missions. Some were killed on sortie 1, most never reached 10. The average life expectancy of a German day fighter pilot in 1944 was measured not in months, but in weeks. Experience declined, confidence waned, desperation crept in. Meanwhile, the Americans did the opposite. Their bomber crews followed a rotation system. After 25 missions, later increased to 35 as survival rates improved, they went home. They lived. They trained the next wave, a pipeline of knowledge, discipline, and continuity. What began as a war between planes had become a war between systems. One side bled itself dry, consuming its finest pilots in an attempt to halt the tide. The other side built a machine that could not be stopped. And so, as the war entered its final ruinous months, the captured B-17s that once fascinated German engineers became little more than relics of a contest that had already been decided. Their time in German service revealed tactical weaknesses, trained fighter aces, and supported special missions. But ultimately, they illuminated something far more powerful, a truth that haunted every Luftwaffe briefing room, every hangar, every fighter squadron. You can't shoot down 10,000 bombers when you can only build 1,000 fighters. You can't stop round-the-clock bombing when your pilots fly 4 missions a day and die before learning what works. You can't hold cities together when every worker knows that the sirens will come again and the roof might not be there tomorrow. There were no answers left inside the framework of Nazi Germany's military strategy or its war economy. The regime had planned for quick victory, not sustained industrial war. When that plan failed, the war turned into a contest of endurance, and Germany had already lost. The B-17 Flying Fortress, with its 160 rounds per second defensive wall, its rugged airframe, and its endless parade of reinforcements, became more than a bomber. It became the judgment of that war. And no matter how many pages were filled at Rechlin, no matter how many lessons were learned from Wolfhound, that judgment never changed. When American bomber crews completed their tour, 25 missions at first, later 35, they went home, not to rest, but to teach. Their hard-won knowledge paid for in blood and fire over occupied Europe, became the foundation for a new generation of airmen. These veterans taught tactics, survival, and the psychology of combat, creating a culture of institutional learning that preserved experience, even when individual lives were lost. The Luftwaffe could not afford this luxury. Its pilots flew until they were killed, captured, or so physically and mentally broken they could no longer climb into the cockpit. Every man with flight experience was kept in the line. No rotation, no rest, no second tour as instructor. As losses mounted, so too did inexperience, a vicious spiral that hollowed out Germany's fighter force. These weren't just different personnel policies. They were the manifestations of different strategic realities. America could rotate its veterans because it had factories delivering new aircraft daily and a training pipeline that turned out new crews faster than the Luftwaffe could shoot them down. Germany had no such depth. At Rechlin, the captured B-17s gave the Luftwaffe deep insights into American design. They measured the machine's strengths, its firepower, its weaknesses, and learned how to counter it tactically. But the true lesson was not technical. It came later, in May 1945, when the guns fell silent. Germany lay in ruins. Its cities burned. Its industries were reduced to rubble. Its military was crushed, squeezed between Soviet armies in the east and Western allies from the west. There was no escape, no reversal of fate. The bombers had done their work. Over 2 relentless years, the strategic bombing campaign had achieved its aims. The same defensive firepower that so astonished German test pilots in 1943 proved just enough to allow thousands of bombers to get through. Not unscathed, nearly 5,000 B-17s were lost to all causes, but enough to cripple Germany's war economy. The story ended where it began, in the sky, where men fought and died in machines that represented not just engineering, but entire national philosophies of war. Hans Werner Lörcher lived to see the end. He survived the war, lived until 1991, and left behind memoirs that spoke with the voice of experience. He was proud of his service, proud of his technical accomplishments, but honest in his assessment of Germany's defeat. In interviews and post-war projects, he acknowledged what many had already suspected. Germany had lost the war the moment the United States fully mobilized. His knowledge of Allied aircraft, of their strengths and limitations, made him valuable to post-war intelligence efforts, where he contributed to Allied evaluations of German and captured planes. But the conclusions remained unchanged. The Wolfhound, the first intact B-17 captured by Germany, had served from December 1942 until its destruction in April 1945. For more than 2 years, it trained pilots, informed tactics, and helped German engineers unravel the logic behind the fortress. But its lessons were strategically impotent. Understanding your enemy's advantages does not eliminate them. It does not give you the fuel, aluminum, manpower, or infrastructure to match them. The 13 machine guns that impressed every German test pilot were not just weapons. They were a philosophy, rendered in metal, volume of fire to overwhelm attackers, mutual support through formation, redundancy through coverage from every angle, survivability through sheer numbers. It was a design born not just of engineering, but of industrial confidence, a belief that losing 5,000 aircraft was acceptable because 12 Typhoon 131 more could be built. It was a strategy that worked despite the cost, despite crews dying at over 20% rates in 1943, despite Luftwaffe aces who shot down dozens of bombers despite terrible losses to flak, collisions, weather, and exhaustion. Because enough B-17s got through, they flattened the Ruhr, incinerated factories, collapsed rail networks, and cut Germany's arteries until its military could no longer function. And as the final months passed, with Germany burning and broken, even the best-trained German fighter pilots had no illusions left. They were no longer defenders of the Reich. They were delaying the inevitable. The B-17 Flying Fortress, that fortress of aluminum, roaring engines, and endless 50-caliber fire, had become something more, a symbol not just of American air power, but of industrial victory. It was the visible face of a system that built tanks and rifles and ships and boots and bombers faster than the enemy could destroy them. In the end, the greatest weapon the Allies possessed wasn't a machine gun or a Norden bomb sight. It was a spreadsheet, the one that proved that Germany could not keep up. When the war ended, American factories were still building B-17s at rates that would have allowed the entire combat fleet to be replaced within just 6 months. The numbers alone rendered the Luftwaffe's efforts a bitter arithmetic problem. No matter how many fortresses were shot down, more always came. The defenders were fighting an attrition war against an enemy whose production lines ran faster than they could fire bullets. The captured B-17s in German service became, in a sense, unwitting witnesses to their own nation's downfall. With every test flight, they revealed something new, not just about aerodynamics or armament, but about the depth and scale of American industrial might. Each evaluation report recorded more than technical specifications. They documented the contours of a war Germany could never win. Every training exercise, every pilot debriefing echoed the same inescapable truth. The United States could build faster than Germany could destroy. The defensive firepower, the 13 machine guns, the interlocking fields of fire, the thousands of rounds per aircraft, deserved admiration. And the Luftwaffe officers who flew these captured machines gave it. They had flown other bombers. They had seen what British and Soviet designs could do. But they had never encountered anything like the B-17. They marveled at the geometry of its defenses, overlapping arcs of fire that denied almost every attack angle. They noted the lethal reach of the Browning 50 calibers, capable of killing fighters hundreds of yards out. They were struck by the sheer volume of ammunition that allowed gunners to maintain sustained fire for minutes on end, something unheard of in most Luftwaffe aircraft. But what they saw through the gun sights and through the riveted skin of those bombers was not just a weapon, it was a warning. Those guns were the visible edge of something far greater, the arsenal of democracy, humming at full capacity, a coordinated, mechanized, continental machine of war that, once fully mobilized, could not be stopped. Factories in Seattle, subcontractors in Detroit, supply chains stretching across oceans, assembly lines that never slept. That was the real weapon. The B-17 was just the shell. The true force was the system that could design it, build it, improve it, and deploy it by the thousands, all while waging war across 2 oceans, from the Pacific jungles to the beaches of Normandy. And when the full weight of that system was brought to bear, it crushed everything in its path. The fortresses came in waves, hundreds at a time. Their bombs found their targets. Their engines thundered over factories and marshalling yards, oil refineries and airfields, and Germany, exhausted, isolated, and outproduced, fell with them. The captured B-17s had value. They taught tactics, revealed vulnerabilities, and helped train pilots to fly into the jaws of those guns. But they could not alter the trajectory of history. They were tools of understanding, not of salvation, because no amount of study could close the industrial chasm between the United States and Nazi Germany. No tactical lesson, no ingenious ploy could offset the fact that Germany was simply outbuilt, outmatched, and outlasted, and that, more than any gun emplacement or engineering breakthrough, was the final lesson of the Flying Fortress. The strategic destiny of the war was never truly decided in the skies. It was forged in steel, calculated in tons, and measured in the cadence of factories that never ceased.